Welcome to the SpiritRxPodcast, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Healing. In this place, two healers come together, each walking a different path, yet bound by a common purpose. Dr. Luke, a quantum chiropractor, and Dr. Hummel, a naturopathic doctor. These two practitioners have dedicated themselves to a vital quest to unite the timeless remedies passed down through the ages with the powerful discoveries of modern medical science. For they understand what many have forgotten, that true healing honors both tradition and innovation. Should you wish to learn more of their stories, their practices, or how to walk this path with them, you will find that knowledge in the link below. And now, let the healing wisdom begin.
Today we have an amazing guest with us. Celeste, you are over at the Shift, a healing and wellness facility in Scottsdale, Arizona, and you do a lot of amazing things. So we are super excited to have you on here today. So if you could just introduce yourself a little bit and, tell our listeners the story of sort of how you first got started and got into what you're doing.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I was thinking about this last night on, where do you begin with your story? So what's relevant, right? So I grew up in Oregon. I find that relevant because I feel like I was exposed to all things weird at a very early age. And it was just kind of normal. We call them hippies now. And, now we know about grounding, but we've been doing grounding since I was born. So really what happened was I wanted to be a surgeon, and I specifically wanted to be a surgical oncologist. And so in that path, I came across this book by Bernie Siegel, and he wrote Love, Medicine, and Miracles, How to Live Between Office Visits. And I was so intrigued by what he found was, that the mind is so imperative on your healing process. And he was, coming from the MD world of stats. You have this disease process, here's what's going to happen. And, this person might be dead in 6 months. And what he found over and over was bumping into these patients 2, 3, 5 years later, and they were thriving. And so that really opened my mind to how much control do we have over our health, and what are the things that can move that forward? And again, tapping back into Oregon, we were handing out spores, I guess, baby mushrooms from a kombucha tea back when I was in high school. And that was what you did for a friend. You gave them a little mushroom, a mushroom baby. So I was just around that world for, growing up. I thought it was normal. So went to a conference, saw Bernie Siegel speak, Andrew Wild, and really that set me on a trajectory. So when I got into university and I thought I'm going to become this MD and be a surgeon, it quickly was not a fit, mainly because of organic chemistry. But that aside, it really intrigued me again in why do some people thrive with the same, similar diagnosis, and the other person just doesn't seem to pull out of it. So I was lucky, and I started leading a cancer support group through those years, and just became really fascinated with cancer because that was a pretty, cut and dry, people get better or they don't. And that just, again, I just started pulling everything together on what seemed to work, and that just kind of led me to where I am today.
So, all right, excellent. Well, my understanding is that you do a lot of work with red light therapy, exercise with oxygen, and localized vibration. And then you might even combine those in some interesting ways. So could you kind of like dive into those three topics for us and then share how you utilize those in your practice?
Sure, love to. So oxygen therapy came about a couple of years ago, maybe 5 by now. Just some doctors that I was working with were explaining to me the process of oxygen and how we know that once the cells become depleted, that's when the disease process is able to start. Hyperbaric was on the market and kind of the most known way to receive oxygen. And it just was a good fit because my background is movement. I got exposed into Pilates after an injury and was able to rehab a severe back injury through movement. So I thought, well, if we're designed to move and we know that oxygen is important to us, the two together just seemed like a natural thing to me. Came across a great company and just brought that into the practice. And from there, started getting some great feedback from doctors like Dr. Hummel explaining the actual science behind it. And that just became, for me, it just made sense to move and get oxygen, but I really didn't have the background to understand really what was happening at a cellular level. So over the years, that's been kind of interesting. I've tried to grasp what I can. But what I have seen is that working with cancer patients, Lyme disease, mold exposure, any neurologic condition, very simply put, people get better. They feel better and they get better faster. So, I see people that they call brain fog with Lyme disease. After one 20-minute session, they take the mask off and they're like, I feel great, which is all that we're really going for in a day, is to try to get those great patient outcomes. So I love oxygen. We use it with almost everybody that comes through. The targeted vibration that you're talking about was something that was pretty wild. We know vibration plates. We know that the body loves vibration, but how can you do that in a specific way, maybe on a joint? Maybe someone has frozen shoulder and we just can't seem to figure out how to get that to move without, doing a lot of manipulation. So that became something that was really great. I still use it every day, and I use it in different ways than it was actually designed. Again, because of the doctors like Dr. Hummel that kind of coach and guide me on, here's the real science of what's happening. It's not just that it feels good and we see the shoulder move, like here's actually what's happening on a cellular and a tissue level. So the targeted vibration, most people go, oh, I've seen that. I have one of those. And they're referring to the percussion, the Theragun. So the targeted vibration, the way it oscillates so fast is it's almost mimicking a myofascial release. And so the tissue warms up and we start to feel and sometimes see these adhesions release. Now we start to see those, what we would call knots disappear. So that's been amazing. And then using that with the red light too has been a game changer. There's less pressure that I need to apply on these, areas that are resistant to movement. So I like to put the red light on it first. Sometimes I just put that over the affected area, or maybe just, whole body, let them enjoy that for maybe 15 minutes. And then we start with the vibration. The tissue just seems to respond.
So basically, Celeste, you and we were working together when I was down there in Scottsdale. I would refer patients over to you guys to do these therapies for people. And the reason that I did that was not because I thought, hey, this would be a great thing to add in. It was because I saw very quickly the difference between the patients that were doing these things and those that were not. It was a significant difference. And so let me just, clarify to everyone here that's listening that these therapies are powerful. And if you bring them in as adjunctive therapies to, other directed medical treatments, it can be a profound thing to add in. It can make a big difference in people's lives. So you mentioned you start with the red light. So if you were to kind of stack these things together in a way, or pair them, right? Going from sort of top to bottom, and I know it's different with everyone, it's very hard to generalize, right? How would you generally stack these in a way that you think are going to synergistically improve the outcomes of people in general?
Yes, thank you for saying in general. So yes, I really like to pair them, to be honest with you. So if I have it my way, I love to do EWOT with the red light on them. So that's my favorite. If I were to layer them and I needed to do one at a time, I think I would do red light first. I would do the vibration next, and then I would finish with the oxygen. And again, I would turn to you to ask what's actually happening on a cellular level, on a scientific way. But what my thought is, warming up the tissue with the red light, starting to stimulate the mitochondria, as we all say, give more ATP production, calming the nervous system, warming up the tissue literally for what's going to happen. Then I like the vibration because, again, we're releasing the adhesions on a structural aspect, but I'm also very curious on what it does for people that are looking to detox. What is it doing from the tissue? Is it actually releasing toxins into the bloodstream? Is it allowing the body to do its process easier and quicker? And if that is so, then I like to finish up with the oxygen.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So that's exactly the way I would do it too. So I'm in
Good.
agreement.
So it almost sounds like you're making a martini.
The red light. Yeah, how would we mix that?
The temperature with the cubes, and then you end it with the shaking and combining everything together. That's awesome. Well, let's say that a person is skeptical, especially let's say about the red light therapy, because like, okay, there's this little panel and there's red light, like a person could think, well, what does that mean? How does that work? So could you talk more about like the red light therapy and how that light gets into your body? And you mentioned the mitochondria, but like how long do you use it? And if I were thinking about buying a panel at home, tell me some more things about the red light therapy.
Sure. I'll start with the skeptic comment.
Yeah.
By the time people make it to my clinic, they've tried almost everything. They're exhausted. Either they're dealing with a chronic disease process or it's chronic pain. And so for them to walk into the clinic and go, you want me to stand in front of that red light and that's going to be life-changing? Okay. So, I gently encourage them to go into the red light room, and I have them stand in between, walls that are, covered in red lights or red light panels, and they feel a difference. I don't need to say anything. Someone came out the other day and they said, I feel like I was in the sun and it felt amazing, but something tells me that I'm not getting the damage to my skin. And I was like, that's a simple way of putting it. Yes. So almost every person has come out and said they instantly feel like they have more energy. So for me, understanding about a 5th grade level that yes, the mitochondria is being stimulated. We are receiving more ATP cellular energy that the entire body can then disperse to areas that are in need, maybe depleted and run down. That's the very simple way of putting it. We could go deep into the science more, but I think what people are starting to realize is it's becoming a little bit of a household name. Everybody has heard about red light, and then they're trying to decipher, well, how long am I in it? And is there any damage, or maybe can I overdo it? And so what we've seen is that, unfortunately through trial and error, we've had some people come in right after treatment. We turn on the red light. And when I say red light, I mean near and far, right? So there's a bright red light that's the one we know about because we can see it. And then there's the near infrared, and that's invisible to the naked eye. We have found that sometimes when we turn on both red lights, it increases the circulation so much, in my opinion, that a person can start to feel a little bit more symptomatic, say if they've just received chemotherapy or maybe some of these high dose vitamins that they're receiving for their treatment. So we've been real careful in learning how long are they in front of the lights and which nanometer depths are we putting on them. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and then I'll just chime in here with a little piece too, is that at least what the research has shown is that generally within a 24-hour period, if you can get like 18 to 22 minutes, somewhere in there, like I think is what it was. I think some actually had it as low as 15, but generally it's like 18 to 22 minutes. That is enough to create that mitochondrial stimulation, and that can last through about that 24-hour period, which is pretty incredible.
Right.
So you just think like, oh, for 20 minutes I can have this light on, and
20 minutes seems to be a good rule of thumb that's easy to remember. Yeah.
So, okay, so we talked about red light and its mitochondrial stimulating effects and all the energy that it produces. Let's hop a little more into EWOT. So EWOT, as we mentioned, is exercise with oxygen. And can you kind of walk through a little bit about what that looks like to people? So I know that's relatively new for a lot of people. Red light's becoming more of a household name. I feel like EWOT is still like, what? So can you walk through what that means generally, what the typical dosing is, like how that works, timing, and then what are some of the physiological effects that people see with that?
Sure. So this is EWOT. It's a 900-liter bag of oxygen. And the system that I use has 2 tubes. A person will put on a mask so they look like a jet fighter pilot for a few minutes. And I let them choose whatever form of exercise they want. You know, it's important to increase the heart rate, but again, I work with a specific population that may not be ready to do a 15-minute sprint that day. So I have a rebounder people can use. Sometimes I'll put them on a Pilates reformer and they can jump. But typically it's known to do it on a treadmill. An elliptical is great as well. We would love all 4 limbs to be moving to, you know, pull the oxygen into that tissue. So most people will be doing a bag in about 15 to 20 minutes, depending upon how fast they're moving. I have people that come in and sometimes they'll go through 2 bags. They're enjoying it. They're running, and maybe they're working on, you know, sports performance more so than a detox or just general health. So after we see that people are, like I mentioned before, their brain fog disappears, they have more energy, just a generalized more clarity. People report that they sleep better that night. I'm trying to think of, I mean, there's so many benefits that come from it. It's a systemic treatment that lowers the inflammation, as I was saying. So from there, we can just see that all systems start to work better.
Well, like EWOT sounds like a character on Star Wars.
I know. Yes, everybody calls it EWOT. I've come over to do EWOT. Okay,
Yeah.
sounds great. Yes,
Well,
it's exercise with oxygen therapy. Close.
So like a phrase I use a lot is, you know, motion is lotion. But
Yes.
so a key component of this is that it's not just the oxygen, but it's combining it with the movement. Can you like help us explain, like, well, what's the difference if I just am in a recliner with oxygen on, as opposed to I'm actually doing exercise at the same time?
Sure. Well, I use the term with people that come in that I want you to move so that it makes your body thirsty for the oxygen. I can sit you in the corner and you can relax, and we will visually see how much of that bag you're able to take down. So if our goal is to dose the body or treat the body with oxygen, of course, we want to get as much as we possibly can. So people that are going into a hyperbaric, yes, it's pressurized. And I feel like that's self-administered from what I understand. They do the deep breaths as they're in there. My background is movement. So I just really don't have anything other to say than like you were saying, movement is everything. It is the way that our body is designed to heal itself. It's the way that we digest our food. You know, I have people that come in and they're really not ambulatory. And so they've noticed a decrease in the way their digestion is moving, their breath is going, their diaphragm is not as strong as it used to be. And so I see that patients start to gain their confidence back, that they truly are healing. People say, I haven't been able to walk more than 8 minutes in months. They get on here with the oxygen, and next thing you know, they're looking at me, their eyes are big, and I said, I've been on here for 20 minutes, you know, to give them the confidence to know that they are able to heal. And so they can see that and feel that with their body as they're moving, I think more so than sitting and you know, breathing the oxygen without the movement.
Well, I love how you can explain things in really simple, easy to understand ways that the average person could understand. That's excellent.
Yeah, it's very helpful because I feel like for most people, after like 30 seconds of me talking about something, they just glaze over.
Doctor speak.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, I don't know how to make this easier to understand. The reality of it is that these therapies are fantastic on so many different levels. I just want to say, when it comes to oxygen with exercise, there's a big difference between that and sitting in a chair just breathing oxygen. Like, the problem with oxygen being on all the time is people adapt to what they're doing, right?
Right.
And so the benefit of doing a short-term burst with exercise is you're basically telling your body, hey, this goes with the exercise, and now we're going to supercharge everything, and your body's going to function better for a period of time. And that's a good thing to adapt to.
Right.
And so that I think that's a really important distinction to make, is that putting someone on supplemental oxygen is not a good thing generally. But like they used to say in my Kung Fu class, which I thought was really good, my teacher would always say, timing is everything. And so that's a big, big part of
Yeah.
this.
And I love, you know, resiliency is a term we use a lot, but it applies to the systems of the body as well. And we need variability. We need to vary walk fast, walk slow, for example, move a lot, move a little less. So combining these things is very constructive.
Yeah, and I'll say, Celeste, you're such a humble person. You've been doing this for a long time. You're very knowledgeable of it. What I've come to recognize is that people that know a lot, generally speaking,
Yes.
recognize how much we don't know. And like that's a big thing, and that's all of us.
Right.
Like, and I think it makes a big difference because some people out there would just be like, oh yeah, this is everything, it works for everybody, everyone should do this, every single person. And that just isn't the case. The majority could do really well with it, but there are exceptions on every therapy.
Right.
And on
So
that
let's talk.
note, can I ask
Yeah,
you
Yeah.
something? So on that
yeah.
note, I feel safe doing oxygen therapy in the form of EWOT with almost everybody that comes in because of the contraindications that I'm not clear on for hyperbaric, for instance. I know
Yeah.
that I know enough to know that there are some people that should not go in the hyperbaric chamber, but I don't know all of it. But I do know that when I'm moving someone with oxygen therapy, I am not going to run the risk of giving them oxygen poisoning, which I know is incredibly rare, but it could happen. I also, know that if someone has something going on with their heart, or maybe they're dealing with blood clots, other sort of, touchy subjects that we want to really, have concern over, I feel very confident that oxygen, in the form of EWOT is really great for them. And it's very much indicated.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking to the hyperbaric chambers,
Right.
I think they're fantastic too. But there's two big things about hyperbarics that people have to recognize. One is it's extremely costly. Like it's extremely
Yes.
costly to not only get one, right,
Right.
in your home, which there's limits there, but then the second thing is going and getting consistent use of it.
Right.
And that's where the studies all are, is with this consistent use. And so this is like exercise with oxygen therapy is like, I would say, much more accessible to the general population, and at the same time, also a lot safer in many ways.
Time
So,
commitment alone. I mean, being in a hyperbaric chamber is,
yeah,
an
that's a
hour,
great
hour and a
point.
half. You're in there reading, and that's great. But yeah, we're in and out in 15 to 30 minutes, and it's really great. The cost, and the ability to have a home unit as well. So a lot of people decide that they want to do this every day. They want their family to do it as well, so they end up just buying a home unit, and it becomes part of their, healing path.
Well, I love that too. Let's mention that because that's something I know that you do, is you don't just you encourage people, you're there and available to provide these therapies to people in person, right? But you also encourage them to do it themselves, right? Which is like teaching a person to fish.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
it's a good idea to start out with having someone teach you, instruct you, guide you before you want to jump off the deep end and just order something off of Amazon and hope
Yeah.
for the best.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
speaking of that, like I think like vibration plates are becoming a popular thing as well. Now, I get mixed results when patients tell me that they've recently purchased one for their home. Some will say they love it, and some will say, "Oh my gosh, I can't stand it." Can you speak to that a little bit?
With specifically the targeted vibration that I use.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a vibration plate, and then I think maybe you're doing something even more specific with the targeted vibration, but kind of
Right.
speak to the difference between those two things.
Yeah. Well, I can say from myself, I don't like standing on the vibration plate. I am one of those people that for some reason when I get on there, I don't know if I lock my knees or I do it wrong, but rattles me all the way up to my teeth. I can't stand it. And I will say
Right.
that not just because I use it here in the clinic, the handheld targeted vibration, I have not had one person go, "Ooh, I don't like that." I mean, it's instant. It just turns off that fight or flight response, just soothes someone, and it is the best massage. I have people that come in and they go, "I don't want to do anything today. Just let me lay down and do an hour of vibration, please." So, okay. So, there's different ways to use it. We can move, sometimes when people have edema in their legs, I can do a sweeping motion to move that up towards the lymph and encourage the better circulation. I use it with people that have neuropathy on their feet. They report that they start to get some great feeling back. I use it in orthopedic situations. Someone back hurts, their shoulder hurts. We talked about that. Knees. I mean, it just feels wonderful. I I joke with people when they do decide to buy one. They say, well, what do I do? How do I use it? I go, just don't put it in your eye. You know, like I literally put it on the top of their head like they're a unicorn, and they love it. It's really an incredible device, and I'm very happy with the company. It's made here in the US, and they now have 3 different sizes. So, you know, initially it was a little bit cost prohibitive. You know, not everybody was in a situation where they could spend $1,500, and now they have 3 different versions. So it's very, very comfortable for people now to, I think, around that $200 to $300 price point. So I'm always happy to help my clients buy one for the home, or when they decide to leave Scottsdale for their treatment. They love it.
So for the audience, then what company is this if they want to
Sure.
dig in a little bit?
Probably go to your website, right? Do you sell everything on your website? Are they
I
available?
don't, and I probably should, huh? I don't make anything off of it. So that's, you know, I just am happy to support the company and send people that way. So it's rapid release, and it is just phenomenal. Like I said, they have 3 different sizes now, and I think they just came out with them 6 months ago. So they just used to have the one that was for clinical use, and now there's a travel size, and, you know, more comfortable for the hand, and still as powerful and wonderful. So it's a wonderful, wonderful tool to have in the toolbox, literally.
It's awesome. Yeah.
It's really cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about like all of these kind of different therapies. Is there any other therapies you wanted to sort of chat about that you're doing that we didn't include on our list
I'm
of
so glad you asked. So my background is movement. So I use Pilates and Gyrotonic as a big key to getting people feeling great. So Gyrotonic is similar to Pilates. I say they're like cousins. Their 2 main differences is Pilates is all about align the spine and learn how to move the joints in their best congruency so that we don't do any damage. Gyrotonic is like, that's all really fun and dandy, but we're going to arch and curl the spine. It's all about arch and curl, bone rhythms, how they naturally like to spiral. And we just get incredible results. It's one of my favorite things for shoulders. You know, most of us are a bit kyphotic. We don't have that ability to sit upright without feeling like we're in constant tension. So those are just 2 of my absolute favorites. But what I came across recently, and I say recently, about 3 years ago, was a frequency technology that a friend of mine kept talking about, and I just didn't get it. She was using Rife, and I was like, okay, I've kind of heard about Rife. It seems a little bit weird. I'm hanging on to some wands, and like feels a bit like Scientology, no offense. But it is the only bioidentical frequency on the market, and it's the only one that gives a corrective influence. And I couldn't wrap my brain around that for the longest time until someone told me the guy that developed it is Dr. Nabrinsky. He'd made the first piece of equipment back in 1978, and he's the one that developed the lie detector test, amongst other biofeedback systems. So what made sense to me was it was looking for how the body should be and then how it really is. So there are 3 different pieces of this. The one is the Acuscope, and that is calibrated to look for impedance on nerves. The other 2 are both Myopulse. One is for above the collarbone, and then the other one is for the large, big bellied muscles. It's wild. The results I have seen with the Acuscope and the Myopulse I hate to say it, it's life-changing. It's really been absolutely fantastic for everybody. So I use it on a systemic sense, is that we go through the meridian lines that an acupuncture would know, or, you know, Chinese meridians that have been around forever. So we treat whole body. It's like literally jump starting a dead battery.
There was a professional baseball player, right?
Yes.
That was using this and having really amazing results. Like,
absolutely.
who was that? I remember hearing about this.
Yeah. So that's the Lowe brothers, Cam and Cody. They are here in town as well. Fabulous human beings. And they are very, very in love with that technology because both of them were professional athletes. Cam was a professional pitcher for many, many years. And his brother Cody was a volleyball 2-time Olympian. So both of them had injuries that were going to take them out of, career-ending injuries. And I don't remember exactly how many years it put back on them, but I think it was between like 6 and 8 more years that they were able to come back and play at that high level because of this technology. So yeah, it's incredible.
Amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that leads kind of into you've already touching on, seen some amazing results, but like across the board, tell us about some other like really crazy cool success stories that you've seen with people using a variety of these different modalities?
Sure. So one of my favorite stories is a gentleman that unfortunately did not have great spine surgery success. He went in and was trying to get just, the typical L4, L5, S1, and right afterwards got a big clot. They had to go back in and do surgery to remove that. Then it got infected. And then they wanted to go back in. And after the infection, they felt like maybe something was left in there. They didn't know. So he went through 3 surgeries in about 4.5 weeks. And they wanted to do another one. Needless to say, he was not in great shape by the time I met him. He had all sorts of symptoms, including loss of, bowel and bladder. His gait was horribly disrupted. And the man's goal was to walk his daughter down the aisle in Hawaii on a sand beach. And the way he walked in, that was not going to go very well. He was very topsy-turvy on his feet, to say the least. And that was the first time I had really seen the Acuscope in action. I had used it on other things, a sore wrist and, back pain. But literally in 9 sessions, this man, well, let's back up. He came in the office the next day and had a look on his face, and I was nervous. I thought he was going to say, "What are we doing here? I was in so much pain." He says to me, "I didn't wet my pants yesterday." I said, "Oh, thank you for sharing." Then the next time he came in, he said, "I really think we're onto something here." He's like, "This was the first time that I was able to feel down in my saddle." He said, "That's been numb for over 1.5 years. No feeling whatsoever." And I'm looking at him like, yeah, 2 sessions? This is incredible. So after about 8, 9 sessions, he goes, "Celeste," he goes, "I'm 90% better." He goes, I cannot believe this. And, I'm quietly going, neither can I, because at this point, I've only been using it for about 1 year. But I mean, it was wild. So needless to say, he, went on to Hawaii with his daughter, walked her down the aisle, and I've never seen him again. It's, the feedback has been that technology, restored his lumbar spine and reinvigorated those nerves and got the function back and the tissues healthy, and he's on his way. So that's one of my favorite stories, because it was so immediate, the results, and so lasting. And that's really what I'm going for. Someone said to me the other day, "You have a horrible business model, Celeste." I said, "Well, thank you." They said, "Well, do you have repeat clients?" I said, "Well, not unless they go bang themselves up. No, my goal is to fix whatever is happening, and then they can go out in the world and do the things they want to do." And they said, "That's really a horrible business model. You should think about kicking them on their way out the door."
Oh, geez.
Thank you. Thanks. So we kind of laugh about that, but yeah, that's really my goal. Is I don't want people to be dependent. I want them to do things that are going to, keep their bodies strong and healthy, like the oxygen, the red light, more preventative measures. But, I'm here when the O's happen, and, thank God for pickleball. They do happen.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about some generalized cost of these therapies. And the reason I want to bring this up is part of what I've seen is that people are always hunting for the best deal on stuff, right? And there are a lot of knockoffs out there. And so, what is generally for each of these therapies, let's say they bought a red light or they got an EWOT system, or what was the name of the vibration device? You actually gave it a name. It was
Yes,
the
it's
company.
Rapid Release is the company.
Rapid Release Technology.
And then there's a company called Targeted Vibration Technique. It's TVT, and that's run by a physical therapist here in town. And he actually teaches doctors, physical therapists, people like me, how to really use it in the best way. So that's really great. Yeah.
So you have the TVT technology. Then we also have the Acuscope and the Myoscope. So generally speaking, each of those things, what is a general price range that people should expect on that type of technology to get something that's actually, useful and not some weird knockoff?
Yeah. Well, thankfully, there aren't any knockoffs on the Acuscope and Myopulse. So it is what it is that, people do other types of frequency, and frequency is really a big chatter now amongst, this community. This is the only bioidentical frequency. It matches what's going on in our body. And that is so important because we don't want to dysregulate. We're trying to heal tissue. So, the woman that instructs me, her name is Jan. She's been right at Dr. Nabrinsky's side since the day the equipment came out. So she knows everything and then some. She said it'd be like yelling at tissue. She's like, you want to match its frequency. So the Acuscope and Myopulse, that is the best on the market. It is what it is. No knockoffs. The rapid release, same thing. There is one company out there that I do believe tried to knock it off, so to speak. But again, rapid release is the only way to go. The oxygen therapy, there are different ones that are coming out right now because it is on the move. I feel like it's like red light was in its infancy. It's starting to become, I'm seeing people just slap their name on it and sell it. And my concern is, this company that I go through, and I can help people purchase if they want, I can guide them to them. I like it because it is a medical grade silicone. I am concerned about the other ones that, I don't know if it's off gassing. So I just be careful there to make sure that, there aren't any chemicals that you're going to be breathing while you're trying to do your therapy. The red lights, it's not regulated, number one. So you really need to be educated. And some of the things we use V-Wave Wellness red lights. And the reason we use those is there's no flicker. A lot of our lights flicker, and that's so upsetting to the nervous system. We don't necessarily notice it. My Lyme patients do. There's different bulb, I don't want to say strengths, but wattages of the bulbs. There's dual chip, there's triple chip, there's different nanometer depths that people can get. We now customize the lights, so you can actually choose which nanometer depth you want. Do you want them to pulse because you want to have more of a neurologic response? So yes, the red light industry is a little bit trickier to find good quality. Again, I think V-Wave Wellness are the best red lights out there. There are other ones on the market. Some are really geared just more towards athletic recovery. Ours are truly medical grade. We're looking for that response on the deep internal organs that we really want to stimulate and make sure that they repair.
In some cases, it might be more cost effective to not buy these things and actually go to a clinic. So even though there's some expense there, you're not purchasing them. And so we might tell ourselves, oh, I need these therapies all the time. But the reality is maybe some of these we only need periodically, and it's more cost effective to go to a clinic like yours. So people should weigh all that out when they're making these considerations.
Yeah, and let me answer that better. To give the range, you can get red lights. You can get a handheld red light. It's about the size of a big cell phone. They're on the market for about $200. You can get a size that's about the size of a binder, like maybe 8.5 by 11. It sits on a desktop. Those are typically between $300 and $800, depending upon what specs. And then there are some panels that are about the size of a door. And those are starting to run around $2,000 to $3,000 for a good quality one. So, lifelong, not a horrible investment. They'll come with a good warranty. Some are 2 years, ours are 5. The EWOT system, it's about $3,000, the one that I like. Your biggest expense is the concentrator. The concentrator that's turning our air into the great oxygen that's in the bag. It's about $2,000. I try to tell my patients, see if your doctor will prescribe one. And if they're on oxygen therapy, maybe they get a nice little availability to have some supplement there on the concentrator. The bag itself is about $1,000. The targeted vibration tool is anywhere between $300 and $1,200. So, not horrible. The Acuscope and Myopulse, that's a little different. Those run you about $11,000 a piece, and there are 3 of them. So yeah, it just depends. If you're lucky and you have a clinic nearby and you can have a practitioner administer all these modalities, great. But, I work with a population that comes into Scottsdale for great treatment, and then they go home. And a lot of them live in very small communities, and they say, I really want to continue this at home. I know it's going to be a game changer for my health. So I help them, build a home clinic.
That's awesome. Well, Celeste, are there any maybe new modalities out there that you're kind of hearing a little buzz about that's kind of piquing your interest a little bit? Anything on the horizon that you're exploring?
Yeah, gosh, if I can find a money tree, I'll tell you my two favorite things right now, and these are a little odd. So I love cold plunge, but for the clinic, I couldn't figure out how to do it. And then also a lot of people I work with have casts, permacasts, and so they can't get wet. Well, there's a company out there that has figured out how to do, it's called dry float. And so they have a hot one and a cold one, and it's like laying on a waterbed, and then it lowers you into it. And so you get to float, and then they wrap you. And so it's either like a cold plunge or like a nice warm float tank, but you don't ever get wet. So those are awesome. They run you about $20,000-$30,000.
I looked at those too.
You just put that on your list to Santa and see what happens. Those are awesome. I'm super infatuated with those. The other thing that I'm really into right now, and I just don't know enough about it, I know that it works, is literally the frequency, like these Tibetan gold bowls that they can put on different parts of your body, on your chakra, and, tune them up, and you literally feel the frequency. I know there's healing in there. I just know that I don't know how it exactly works. I think that that's going to be something that's really going to come out more is, what's going on with our auditory system and how our cells are resonating with that. I know, Dr. Hummel, you made this bed that I had my name on the list for and never came to fruition. It was a sound bed. And I think that's cool. And I definitely think that that's where this weird woo-woo space is headed towards.
So generally speaking, there is a lot of evidence sort of compiling on vibration and healing. And there are so many different frequencies and there are so many different approaches. I mean, you could go as far as histotripsy, using sound waves to hit liver cancer lesions, all the way to, this vibroacoustic therapy we're discussing. And the vibroacoustic therapy, generally speaking, all that is physical waves being produced by sound, and the certain frequency of those waves can have different healing effects on people. 40 hertz has tremendous amount of research, tremendous amount, great for Parkinson's, neurological diseases, inflammation, all sorts of stuff. The question is, now we're so early in the infancy of vibration therapy, and there's so many different approaches. Like you could look at it even like with the myoscope, or the Acuscope and the myopulse, right?
There you go.
Yeah. So even with those are using frequency, but they're a different physical medium, right? Exactly. So they're using more electrical medium, if I believe that's correct.
Yes.
And so the idea is all these things, not only the frequency, but the mediums in which they're transmitted have profound physiological effects, and we are just touching on that as human beings.
Exactly.
And I think that's the future of medicine in a lot of ways.
And I think it's the past as well. I think that these are some ancient modalities,
Tibetan,
and we're coming back to them.
Exactly. Yep.
So I guess as we wrap up today, what are some of the most important kind of final thoughts that you would like to leave with people from our podcast today?
I think the most important overall tone is, I really come from the belief that the body is designed to heal. And it's really not that complicated. We need light. We need oxygen. We need some sort of frequency. And how you're going to go about that is up to you and what feels right and literally what resonates with you. So I try to provide a place that gives some options for people. And there are many ones out there, maybe it's grounding on the beach. Maybe it's just getting that good, clean beach air and taking your shirt off and getting the sun. All of that's free. Again, we are designed to heal. And I just think that I'm trying to find the ways to help people get back into that state, because we've all been a little bit disrupted with all the things that we constantly have coming at us. So how do we get the body into a state that it can receive what is already there for us and available?
Well, Celeste, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank
Do
you.
you want to just share your website and a little bit about the information, how people can reach out to you?
Sure, thank you. I'm located in Scottsdale, Arizona. The clinic website is theshiftaz.com. And then the red lights that we use are V-Wave Wellness. And you can do vwavewellness.com and take a look at all the red lights. I'm always available for consultations. I love when people call me and they ask me questions about the EWOT. How do they get a hold of red lights? How do they use them? Because again, we've done a lot of trial and error on what works and what doesn't work. It's not one size fits all. You don't just turn it on and, hope for the best. Although that does work, but there's always a better way. So yeah, so I love to connect with people. Feel free to call or email anytime. And thank you for the opportunity to share what I do. I really am passionate about helping people find ways to heal themselves.
And I think the light and sound and love, those are the essential elements and waves that we all need. And thank you so much for sharing that and making that your life's purpose.
Thank you too. I appreciate you both so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.